Why did Luke Skywalker wear all black in Return of the Jedi? Unlike his previous outfits, Luke took on a brand new black outfit in episode 6, but why? Well, this is actually explained by George Lucas himself. Luke's outfits were designed to show his growth over time as he went from white to gray to finally black. The black was meant to foreshadow that there was a strong chance he could turn to the dark side just like his father did. However, towards the end of the film, Luke's flap on his jacket opened up to show the color of white. This was done to show that although he had the chance to embrace the dark side, in the end he chose good over evil. Why did Luke Skywalker use a red lightsaber? Although we all know of Luke's iconic green lightsaber, did you know he also constructed a red one? Well, shortly after the events of Return of the Jedi, Luke wielded a Shoto lightsaber with a red blade. The Shoto lightsaber had a shorter blade length than the average lightsaber, such as the one Master Yoda uses. Luke then used this saber as an offhand weapon along with his green one to fight a Sith assassin named Lumaya. Although he ended up defeating her, from what we know of, Luke never wielded this red lightsaber again. How did Luke Skywalker get Yoda's lightsaber? In the Book of Boba Fett, we see Luke with Yoda's lightsaber, but have you ever wondered as to how he got it? Well, after Yoda lost it, his lightsaber was actually destroyed by Palpatine in the canon comics, but there's a catch. If we go back to the fight of Yoda versus Darth Sidious, we all know that Yoda ended up escaping. However, if you look closely, you can see that he still had his lightsaber attached to his hip, even after the fight. This leads us to believe that he either picked it up, or he had a second lightsaber hidden this entire time. From there, we can only assume that he stashed it in his hut until it was eventually found by Luke Skywalker. Why did Luke Skywalker try to fall to his death on Cloud City? In The Empire Strikes Back, we all know that Luke jumped off after Vader asked him to join him, but have you ever wondered as to why he did this? Well, this answer is actually deeper than what we only saw in the film. After Vader told him that he was his father, Luke was filled with nothing but regret. He regretted the fact that he looked up to Anakin for so many years and tried to even be like him just to now find out who he truly was. Luke then told himself that he had two choices. He could either join him or he could just fall to his death. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he'd rather die than to betray what both Obi-Wan and Yoda had taught him. Why did Luke Skywalker throw away his lightsaber in Return of the Jedi? One common question is why Luke decided to throw his lightsaber away, considering it would only leave him defenseless against Palpatine. Well, there's actually an explanation for this. As Luke looked down at Vader's destroyed hand, it was in that very moment where he then realized that he became just like his father. He told himself that he worked so hard to defeat the darkness, but now it's almost as if he was becoming a part of it. After much thought, he then said to himself that the only way he could possibly destroy the dark side was if he completely rejected it. To do this, Luke then decided to throw his lightsaber away, ultimately choosing good over evil. Why was Moff Gideon terrified of Luke Skywalker? In the Season 2 finale of The Mandalorian, Moff Gideon looked terrified when he saw Luke Skywalker fighting the Dark Troopers, but did you know there was actually a reason as to why he reacted like this? Well, because this was 5 years after Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker was known as a living legend to the Imperials. In their eyes, they not only saw him as the person who helped destroy 2 Death Stars, but also the last person to survive in a room with 2 Sith Lords. Gideon probably thought that Luke was actually the one that killed Palpatine in that room and was also responsible for Vader's death as well. Because of this, he was horrified that this lone Jedi was no other than Luke Skywalker. How did Luke Skywalker react to Anakin killing Younglings? After forgiving his father for all the destruction he caused throughout the galaxy, Luke would come to terms knowing that Anakin did many horrible things. However, one thing that he never knew about was that his own father slaughtered the Younglings in the Jedi Temple. Decades after the events of Episode 6, R2 revealed security recordings to Luke, showing him everything that happened at the temple during Order 66. As he began to watch the recordings, Luke saw dozens of children scream in horror, as he then witnessed multiple clone troopers blasting them down one by one. Eventually, however, he would then see a hooded figure appear. This hooded figure would be no other than the former Jedi Knight, Anakin Skywalker. Luke then watched as Anakin ignited his lightsaber and sliced down every youngling and Padawan in sight. Although he was horrified of what he just witnessed, crazy enough, Luke didn't blame his father for what he did, as he knew that he was fully corrupted by the dark side at this point. Despite his actions, Luke still loved him unconditionally. How did Luke Skywalker eventually marry Palpatine's assassin? Shortly after the events of Order 66, a young woman named Mara Jade was taken from her parents and eventually trained under the teachings of Emperor Palpatine. As the Emperor's hand, Mara would spend most of her time hunting down surviving Jedi and was even directly trained in the ways of the Force. However, as Palpatine fell down the reactor shaft in episode 6, he would send out his final order for Mara, telling her to find and kill Luke Skywalker. Eventually, Mara and Luke would finally encounter one another, but little did they both know as to what would happen next. Instead of becoming enemies, they would actually work together on multiple missions and eventually fall in love with one another. As the feelings were mutual, they would then decide to get married and begin to train the next generation of Jedi Knights. Why do Luke and Obi-Wan's lightsabers look identical? Two iconic lightsabers in Star Wars were both Obi-Wan's and Luke's, but have you ever wondered why they look so similar? Well, shortly after getting his hand sliced off in The Empire Strikes Back, Luke went on a hunt to build a new lightsaber. This journey eventually led him to Tatooine, where he visited Obi-Wan Kenobi's old hut. However, while in his hut, Luke found a journal that Obi-Wan left for him, and inside of it was a step-by-step guide on how to construct a lightsaber. He then read the journal, and after collecting his crystal and some parts, Luke then built his green saber by copying the exact schematics that Obi-Wan used for his. Although they had a few differences, by the end of it, they looked almost identical. How did Luke Skywalker walk on lava? We all know that Luke was one of the most powerful Jedi, but did you know that he actually walked on lava at one point? Well, years after the events of episode 6, Luke encountered a group of people who didn't believe that he was a true Jedi. To prove them wrong, he then walked across a few stepping stones on a lake of lava, but then all of a sudden, he was attacked. Out of nowhere, a dragon appeared, and although Luke was able to defeat the dragon, the stepping stones he was walking on completely melted. Luke then did the impossible and called upon the Force to walk across the remainder of the lake with only his feet. Safe to say that Anakin should take some lessons. Why did Luke Skywalker use a banned lightsaber crystal for his green lightsaber? After losing both his hand and his lightsaber to Darth Vader on Cloud City, Luke went on a journey to search for a new kyber crystal. However, after failing to find a natural crystal, Luke would then be forced to choose a different alternative. After discovering instructions by Obi-Wan himself, Luke would use a technique that was commonly used by the Sith and was actually banned by the Jedi Order. This technique would involve using the Force to form what was called a synthetic crystal. Unlike a normal kyber crystal, synthetic crystals would be artificially made, and this is why the Jedi frowned upon it. It ultimately broke their traditions, and they saw it as just a quick and easy path to take. Although Luke was nervous during the process of it, he would eventually be successful in constructing his new green lightsaber. What was Luke Skywalker's forbidden Force ability? Although Luke Skywalker was known as one of the most powerful Jedi, there was one ability he used that was actually forbidden within the Jedi Order. This ability was no other than Force Crush, in which Luke used against the Dark Troopers in The Mandalorian. Force Crush was frowned upon by the Jedi Council, because in their eyes, not only was this ability violent, but one would have to channel the dark side in order to use it. However, because Luke was starting his own Jedi Order at this point, he wasn't held back by the dogmatic rules that the Jedi had back then. So very similar to a Jedi like Mace Windu, Luke was able to control himself while using both sides of the Force. What happened to Luke's hand after losing it in The Empire Strikes Back? After Darth Vader sliced off Luke's hand in episode 5, have you ever wondered what happened to his hand after this? Well, in canon, after learning of the Sith World Exegol and what Palpatine's secret plans were, Vader would then choose to visit the world himself. Upon arriving, he then approached multiple tanks, filled with different types of clones, the same ones we saw that created Supreme Leader Snoke in The Rise of Skywalker. However, after Vader continued walking, he then all of a sudden saw Luke's sliced off hand. As he looked upon it, Palpatine then told Vader that he could use his son's hand to make anything. So although it's unknown to what role it played, we can only assume that Snoke does in fact contain Skywalker blood. What did Luke Skywalker do right after Return of the Jedi? A few days after episode 6, Luke went on a mission to find the old tree branches that once belonged to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. On this mission, he snuck into an Imperial base with a fellow pilot, where they eventually came face to face with the branches. However, one of the officers realized they were intruders, so everyone started shooting at them, but Luke was able to force push all the troopers out of the way. As both Luke and the pilot escaped with the branches, he then sliced up every stormtrooper in sight, when all of a sudden, the craziest thing happened. On their way out, one stormtrooper threw 3 thermal detonators right at them, but Luke quickly used the Force and threw them right back at him, which eventually blew up the entire base. Luke and the pilot then escaped with the branches and eventually gave them a new home. If you enjoyed this lore compilation about Luke and you want to learn more about Yoda's best stories, then make sure to click the video in the middle of the screen right here.